Hi.
Hi. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good. Alyssa, are you coming back in person next week?
On the 8th and this Thursday, yeah.
Oh, okay, this Thursday too. Cool.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, you're like my only one who was coming in person in this class, so just check in. Today has been a weird day so far. I went to work this morning like normal, and was there for like an hour, and the internet was out. So like a lot of people had to cancel their first period classes because they couldn't meet through Zoom. I don't have a first period class, so I was all right. But I was just like, what do we do? And like right as first period was starting, they were like, you can go work from home if you want, because we don't know when the internet's going to be back on. So here I am. Sorry. Okay, so who are we missing? Randall was at school earlier. I don't know if they kept him at school or if the internet came back on or anything. I don't know. We have Alyssa, we have Alexis, we have James. We do not yet have Genesis. We have LeBron, Cece, Cade, Zane, and no Randall. Okay, I'm gonna give the others like another minute to see if they show up. Where is this paper? All right, I don't know where they are, so we're just gonna mark them absent and maybe they will show up. I'm gonna actually assume that Randall's probably with Mr. Nelson, but I don't know. Okay, so my plan for today is that we're going to finish reading the prologue of Ethan Frome, which we started last week. Haven't gotten very far. We had other things to accomplish last week, but we're going to finish the prologue today. And then I want to touch base with each of you kind of individually about some grading stuff and about what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So let's go ahead and get our Ethan Frome. Oh, here comes Jenny. Let me fix her attendance. Hi, Jenny.
Hey.
And if Randall shows up, we'll fix his attendance as well. I was just saying, Jenny, the first thing we're going to do is finish reading the prologue of Ethan Frome. So I think I know where we left off, but just to kind of recap, since it's been quite a few days since we looked at it, this is a frame narrative, and we kind of went back over what that meant. But one of you guys pointed out the lynching of Jude Benson was a good example also of a frame narrative, because it starts out with the doctor and like all these people talking about lynching, and then the doctor goes into his story of seeing the one lynching. So this is similar. We started out with this unnamed narrator who's in Starkfield for a job, and he's just kind of like getting to know the town and stuff. And he notices Ethan Frome because Ethan Frome is very noticeable. He's like a big, tall dude with a limp. He's like kind of hunched over, and they're like, he's like, what's the deal with this guy? Why does he look the way he does? Because he seems very like he's got a powerful physique, but he looks so broken down. And they keep referring to the smash up, and said that it happened 24 years previously. It's either 22 or 24. And it's not really clear yet what it means, like what the smash up is. We can kind of infer that it's some kind of accident, but at this point, all we know is that he is injured and he has this wife, Xena or Zenobia. She's almost never referred to in the book as Zenobia. She's always Xena. And she like gets a lot of pills delivered to their house, like medications and stuff. So like, is it him? Is it her? Like who needs the medication? We don't really know at this point. And the only other thing we need to know at this point is that Dennis Eady, who he comes up in the story a fair amount, recommended that the narrator should ask Ethan Frome to take him to town. Something happens with the horses. They fall ill of a local epidemic, and so he can't get where he needs to go. And he's like, oh, you should ask Ethan Frome. Even though he doesn't know you, he'll be happy to like earn a little extra money. So that's kind of where we left off the other day. And I'm going to share my screen. We've got a little bit to get through today. Would anybody like to read, or would you guys like me to?
Can I do it?
Sure. I'm pretty sure that where we left off was at the next morning. And just, you can let me know if and when you get tired or want to pass it off somebody else.
The next morning, when I looked out, I saw the hollow-backed bay between the Varnum spruces, and Ethan Frome, throwing back his warm bearskin, made room for me in the sleigh at his side. After that, for a week, he drove me over every morning to Corbury Flats, and on my return in the afternoon, met me again and carried me back through the icy night to Starkfield. The distance each way was barely 3 miles, but the old bay's pace was slow, and even with firm snow under the runners, we were nearly an hour on the way. Ethan Frome drove in silence, the reins loosely held in his left hand. His brown seamed profile under the helmet-like peak of the cap revealed against the banks of snow like the bronze image of a hero. He never turned to face mine or answered, except in monosyllables, the question I put, or such slight pleasantries as I ventured. He seemed a part of the mute, melancholy landscape, an incarnation of its frozen woe, with all that was warm and sentient in him, fast bound below the surface. But there was nothing unfriendly in his silence. I simply felt that he lived in a depth of moral isolation too remote for casual access, and I had the sense that his loneliness was not merely the result of his personal plight, tragic as I guessed that to be, but had in it, as Harmon Gow had hinted, the profound accumulated cold of many Starkfield winters. Only once or twice was the distance between us bridged for a moment, and the glimpses thus gained confirmed my desire to know more. Once I happened to speak of an engineering job I had been on the previous year in Florida, and of the contrast between the winter landscape about us and that in which I had found myself the year before. To my surprise, Frome said suddenly, "Yes, I was down there once, and for a good while afterward, I could call up the sight of it in winter. But no, now it's all snowed under." He said no more, and I had to guess the rest from the inflection of his voice and his sharp relapse into silence. Another day, on getting onto my train at the Flats, I missed a volume of popular science. I think it was on some recent discoveries in biochemistry, which I had carried with me on the way to read. I thought no more about it till I got into the sleigh and again that evening and saw the book in Frome's hand. "I found it after you were gone," he said. I put the volume in to my pocket and we dropped back into our usual silence. But as we began to crawl up the long hill from Corbury Flats to Starkville Ridge, I became aware in the dusk that he had turned his face to mine. There are things in that book I didn't know the first word about, he said. I wondered less at his words than at the queer note of resentment in his voice. He was evidently surprised and slightly aggrieved at his own ignorance. Does that sort of thing interest you? I asked. It used to. There are one or two rather new things in the book. There have been some big strides lately in that particular line of research. I waited a moment for an answer that did not come, and then I said, if you'd like to look the book through, I'd be glad to leave it with you. He hesitated, and I had the impression that he felt himself about to yield to a stealing tide of inertia. Then, thank you, I'll take it, he answered shortly. I hope that this incident might set up some more direct communication between us. Frome was so simple and straightforward that I was sure his curiosity about the book was based on genuine interest in its subject. Such taste and requirements in a man of his condition made the contrast more poignant between his outer situation and his inner needs. And I hope that the chance of giving expression to the latter might at least unseal his lips. But something in his past history or in his present way of living had apparently driven him too deeply into himself for any casual impulse to draw back to his kind. At our next meeting, he made no allusion to the book, and our intercourse seemed fated to remain as negative and one-sided as if there had been no break in his reserve.
Okay, let's pause for just a second and talk about that, because it's honestly like pretty sad, the picture that we get of him, of Ethan. And like, granted, the narrator hasn't known him for very long. He certainly doesn't know him very well. He's like, we don't even really talk very much. But I mean, before today, the things that we had read about him were like, he's been in Starkfield for too many winters and had been like weighed down by just life, or like the absence of life in this small town. And now I feel like this is a really sad part to see somebody who like has this curiosity and even says that like that kind of thing used to interest him, but he just doesn't know anything. And he's like, it's really clear from his demeanor that he's very aware of his own ignorance. And it really just paints like kind of a sad picture. Everything that we've heard about him is like, this place has just weighed him down. He hasn't been able to take the opportunities that would have afforded him. We read last week about like how both of his parents were sick and like mentally ill in some ways, and then something happened with it. He had to take care of his wife and all this stuff. So he's just like never had a chance to really become anything that he wanted to be. And it's just so sad. And like, I think I have probably warned you guys, this is not a happy book. Like, there are happy moments in it, but it's not a happy book. But we also know that that's pretty indicative of realism, and that's a pretty realistic story, honestly. As sad as it is, some people feel stuck their whole lives and are never able to like accomplish anything for themselves. And whether that's because of like circumstances or environment or duty to their family or whatever, that happens in real life. And it definitely happens a lot in realist literature. And if you guys remember just from notes, one of the main things about realist literature is that they kind of believe that your situation and your life is not really up to you. It's determined by environment or fate or family or chance. But like, there's not really a whole lot that you can do about your lot in life, which sucks. That's a depressing idea. Like, we like to think that we have enough free will to kind of pick ourselves up by the bootstraps and get out of whatever horrible situation we're in. But that's not what they believe. And Ethan Frome is the book that I picked to read for realism, because it's so apt for this. So we can keep going.
From had been driving me over to the flats for about a week when one morning I looked out of my window into a thick snowfall, the height of the white waves massed against the garden fence, and all along the wall of the church showed that the storm must have been going on all night, and that the drifts were likely to be heavy in the open. I thought it probable that my train would be delayed, but I had to be at the powerhouse for an hour or two in the afternoon. And I decided if Rome turned up to push through the flats and wait there till my train came in. I don't know why I put it in the conditional, however, for I never doubted that Frome would appear. He was not the kind of man to be turned from his business by any commotion of the elements, and at that appointed hour his sleigh glided up through the snow like a stage apparition behind thickening veils of gauze. I was getting to know him too well to express either wonder or gratitude at his keeping at his appointment, but I exclaimed in surprise as I saw him turn his horse in a direction opposite to that of the Corbury Road. The railroad's blocked by a freight train that got stuck in a drift below the flats, he explained, as we jogged off into the stinging whiteness. But look here, where are you taking me then? Straight to the junction, by the shortest way, he answered, pointing up Schoolhouse Hill with his whip. To the junction? In this storm? Why, it's a good 10 miles. The bail do it if you give him time. You said you had some business there this afternoon. I'll see you get there. He said it so quietly that I could only answer, you're doing me the biggest kind of favor. That's all right, he rejoined. Abreast of the schoolhouse, the road forked, and we dipped down a lane to the left, between hemlock boughs bent inward to their trunks by the weight of snow. I had often walked that way on Sundays and knew that the solitary roof showing through the bare branches near the bottom of the hill was that of Frome's sawmill. It looked examinate.
Exanimate. I don't know what that word means.
Exanimate.
Maybe like inanimate? I don't know.
It looked exanimate enough with its idle wheel looming above the black stream dashed with yellow white spume and its clusters of shed sagging under their white load. Frome did not even turn his head as we drove by, and still in silence we began to mount the next slope. About a mile farther on the road I had never traveled, we came to an orchard of starved apples writhing over a hillside among outcroppings of slate that nuzzled up through the snow like animals pushing out their noses to breathe. Beyond the orchard lay a field or two, their boundaries lost under drifts, and above the fields, huddled against the white immensities of land and sky, one of those lonely New England farmhouses that make the landscape lonelier. That's my place, said Frome, with a sideway jerk of his lame elbow, and in the distress and oppression of the scene, I did not know what to answer. The snow had ceased, and a flash of watery sunlight exposed the house on the slope above us all in its plaintive ugliness. The black wraith of a deciduous creeper flapped from the porch, and the thin wooden walls under their worn coat of paint seemed to shiver in the wind that had risen with the ceasing of the snow. The house was bigger in my father's time. I had to take down the L a while back. Frome continued, checking with the twitch of the left rein. The bay's evident intention of turning in through the broken down gate. I saw then that usually I saw then that the usually forlorn and stunted look of the house was partly due to the loss of what is known in New England as the L. That long deep roofed adjunct, usually built at right angles to the main house and connecting it by the way of storerooms and tool house with the wood shed and cow barn. Whether because of its symbolic sense, the image it presents of life linked with the soil and enclosing in itself, the chief source is of warmth and nourishment. or whether sorry,
Okay.
or whether merely because of the consolatory thought that it enables the dwellers in that harsh climate to get their morning's work without facing the weather, it is certain that the L, rather than the house itself, seems to be the center, the actual hearthstone of the New England farm. Perhaps this connection of ideas, which had often occurred to me in my rambles about Starkfield, caused me to hear a wistful note in Frome's words, and to see in the diminished dwelling of the image of his own shrunken body. We're kinder sidetracked here now. We're kind of sidetracked here now, he added, but there was considerable passing before the railroad was carried through to the flats. He roused the lagging bay with another twitch, then, as if the mere sight of the house had let me too deeply into his confidence for any farther pretense of reserve, he went on slowly. I've always set down the worst of mother's troubles to that. When she got the
Rheumatism.
rheumatism so bad she couldn't move around, she used to sit up there and watch the road by the hour. And one year when they was 6 months mending the Bettsbridge pike after the floods, and Harmon Gow had to bring his stage round this way, she picked up so that she used to get she picked up so that she used to get down to the gate most days to see him. But after the trains begun running, nobody ever come by here to speak of, and mother never could get it through her head what had happened, and it preyed on her right and long until she died. As we turned into the Corbury Road, the snow began to fall again, cutting off our last glimpse of the house, and from silence fell with it, letting down between us the old veil of reticence.
Yeah.
This time the wind did not cease with the return of the snow. Instead, it sprang up to a gale, which now and then from a tattered sky flung pale sweeps of sunlight over landscapes chaotically tossed. But the bay was so as good as Frome's word, and we pushed on to the junction through the wild white scene. In the afternoon, the storm held off, and the clearness in the west seemed to my inexperienced eye the pledge of a fair evening. I finished my business as quickly as possible, and we set out for Starkfield, with a good chance of getting there for supper. But at sunset, the clouds gathered again, bringing an earlier night, and the snow began to fall straight and steadily from a sky without wind, in a soft universal diffusion, more confusing than the gusts and eddies of the morning. It seemed to be a part of the thickening darkness, to be the winter night itself descending on us layer by layer. The small ray of Frome's lantern was soon lost in the smothering medium in which even his sense of direction and the bay's homing instinct finally ceased to serve us. 2 or 3 times some ghostly landmark sprang up to warn us that we were astray, and then was sucked back into the mist, and when we finally regained our road, the old horse began to show signs of exhaustion. I felt myself to blame for having accepted Frome's offer, and after short discussion, I persuaded him to let me get out of the sleigh and walk along the snow at the bayside. In this way we struggled on for another mile or two, and at last reached a point where Frome, peering into what seemed to me formless night, said, "That's my gate down yonder." The last stretch had been the hardest part of the way. The bitter cold and the heavy going had nearly knocked the wind out of me, and I could feel the horse's side ticking like a clock under my hand. "Look here, Frome," I began. "There's no earthly use in your going any further." But he interrupted me. "Nor you either. There's been about enough of this for anybody." I understood that he was offering me a night's shelter at the farm, and without answering, I turned into the gate at his side and followed him to the barn, where I helped him to unharness and bed down the tired horse. When this was done, he unhooked the lantern from the sleigh, stepped out again into the night, and called me to over his shoulder, "This way." Far above us, a square of light trembled through the screen of snow. Staggering along in From's wake, I floundered toward it, and in the darkness almost fell into one of those deep drifts against the front of the house. From scrambled up the slippery steps of the porch, digging a way through the snow with his heavily booted foot. Then he lifted his lantern, found the latch, and led the way into his house. I went after him into a low, unlit passage, at the back of which a ladder, like staircase, rose into obscurity. On our right, a lane of light marked the door of the room which had sent its ray across the night. And behind the door, I heard a woman's voice droning querulously. From stamped on the warm oilcloth to shake the snow from his boots and set down his lantern on a kitchen chair, which was the only piece of furniture in the hall. Then he opened the door. Come in, he said, and as he spoke, the droning voice grew still. It was that night that I found the clue to Ethan Frome and began to put together the vision of his story.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for doing so much reading. That was great. So one thing that I was just thinking about as we're finishing up this prologue was that I think it's a really good example of a frame narrative, but then I was like, why do I think that? Because nothing really happens, or like almost nothing happens. The whole prologue, all that happens is this guy's in town, he needs a ride, Ethan gives him a ride. That's it. But if you'll remember from our notes about realism, one of the main things is that these writers are not as focused on plot as they are on characters and details. And I think this works really well as a prologue for a frame narrative, but I also think it works really well as an example of realist literature, because what we learn about from this prologue is not what all's going on in the town of Starkfield. It's not plot based. It's we're starting to get a picture of what Ethan Frome is like and being invested in his story, just like the narrator is trying to figure out what happened to him and why he's kind of in the situation in life that he is in. So that's all that we're going to read for today. And I think we will start chapter 1 on Thursday, I believe. So let me talk to you about tomorrow a little bit. I'm sure that some of you know your grades are not amazing in this class. That's not to say nobody's grades are amazing, but not that many of you. Or at least there are quite a few of you that I think really can be doing better. And I recognize that a lot of that is just like this year sucks and we don't have you guys in person. You don't have me looking over your shoulder to annoy you about turning work in. And some of you are doing great with virtual. Some of you I know would be doing better if you were in person. But we're just kind of working with what we have. So I told you guys last quarter that, we had like a makeup day and I was like, I'm not going to do this every quarter because we should be far along enough. And you guys are in 11th grade. You should be responsible enough to not need that. And I don't think you need that, but I want to give you a little bit of help and give you a little bit of an opportunity to make some stuff up. So what I'm going to do for the next couple of minutes, and I want everybody to hang on to the call. I'm going to send each of you a private chat and let you know what zeros you have in this class. And tomorrow during class, you can take the time to work on and make up one of your zeros. So if you have like tons of zeros for daily grades, I'm not even going to include those in my list for you because you would have to make up like pretty much all of them in order for that to make a difference at this point. What I'm going to tell you about that you're missing are bigger grades like writing assignments and projects, or if you have missed something like a vocab quiz or something, I'm going to let you know so that you can study for that and take it tomorrow. So if you guys will just hang on for a minute, I'm going to chat with each of you individually. Unless you don't have any zeros, in which case I'm just letting you know that you don't and you don't have to worry about it. All right. So I'm just going to, if you don't hear from me for a minute, I'm going through alphabetically. I have a list. Transcendental. It's a hard word to spell. Transcendentalist. Also, let me double check because I just suddenly got worried that I missed something for one of you. And also, for the record, I have not looked yet at the stories that you turned in on Friday. So if you didn't turn that in, I don't have a 0 down for that yet. And I don't have it set to close yet anyway. So if you have not turned that in, I'll just wait until after tomorrow and grade those then and not count those late if you didn't turn it in yet. Oh shoot. Also, I did miss something for someone. Glad I took a second look there. What?
Have a good day.
Hey, LeBron. Well, shoot. What does this mean? My writing. And next. And like I said, for the most part, I'm not mentioning your stories that were due on Friday because I don't yet know who turned those in and who did not. One minute. Boy, it's so complicated or confusing because when I look at the chat, Cadence Owens and Cade Powell, like all I can see is Cade, and I'm like, which one am I talking to? Transcendental. And okay, that is everybody. Everybody should have received a private chat from me. So make sure that you either write that down or, you know, save the chat so that you know what you need to be working on. For most of you, it's only one thing or two things, but and just make sure. And also like kind of judge on your own, like if, for instance, the podcast is your only thing, that's probably going to take a little bit more time than like, you know, taking a vocab quiz or something like. Actually, most of these take a little, like the things that we're missing the most of are either the podcast, the nature writing, or the song explication. You could do the nature writing really quickly because there aren't that many parameters for what you're supposed to turn in. Like if you look back at the assignment, it's just, you know, a certain number of lines if you're doing a poem, a certain length if you're doing some kind of prose. So if you're looking at those things, just make sure that, you know, if it's a longer assignment like the explication or the podcast, you might want to work on it some tonight. I'll give you tomorrow during class to work on it, but obviously some of that might require like a little bit more time. So that being said, does anybody have any questions about that? Anything about what you need to do or any of the assignments? Okay. Well, in that case, we've only got like 9 minutes left. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go. We are meeting tomorrow like normal, but our class time will be used to work on this and hopefully get some of you guys grades a little bit higher. So I will see y'all tomorrow.
Okay, bye.